Hello and welcome to Ag PhD. I'm Brian Hefty.
I'm Darren Hefty. Thanks for joining us today. You know, the fun part about the middle of the season is that your crop is growing quickly. It's using up nutrients and you get a chance to put more on, Brian.
Well, I don't know if that's the fun part about the growing season, but one of the things that does make it a little more fun is if you can control the moisture in your field. Besides just center pivot irrigation, which a lot of farmers do around the country, many are turning to subsurface irrigation. We're going to talk about that today.
Well, the problem with that, Brian, is you're going to subsurface irrigate our weed of the week as well. So we'll show you how to wipe that weed out so it isn't using up your valuable water. But first, here's today's Farm Basics.
Farm Basics is brought to you by the Liberty Link trait and Liberty herbicide from Bayer. The most reliable weed management solution, Liberty Link and Liberty herbicide are the link to efficient row crop production and sustainable weed management.
During our Farm Basics time today, we're going to talk about soybean flowering.
Well, when we get to this time of year, we're right at the longest day of the year. And when that happens, that triggers something in our indeterminate soybeans. Now, indeterminate soybeans that are grown in the northern half of the United States, they have their reproductive stages coming as soon as the day length starts to shorten. They're shorter season soybeans by nature, and so they know, hey, the season's starting to get shorter. I better start the reproductive stages if we want to get soybeans made by the time we get a frost.
So what happens after that longest day of the year, June 21st, the soybeans sense that the day length is a little bit shorter, and that's when they start to put flowers on. And then after that, basically the flowering kicks off the reproductive stages, and then pretty soon pods come around, the pods fill, and so on. But this is much different than what we find in the southern United States, where they have determinate soybeans.
Well, the indeterminate soybeans can be doing their vegetative growth at the same time as they're doing their reproductive stages, so they're flowering and putting on pods and so forth. With determinate beans in the southern half of our country, those soybeans will do all of their growth first and get big and tall and bushy, then they will start to do their flowering. So they're not doing the vegetative stages at the same time as the reproductive stages. So it's very much like corn. Corn grows up and grows tall, puts a tassel on, and then it stops the vegetative growth, and then it starts reproduction. That's how the determinate beans work in the southern part of the U.S.
The reason why this is an important thing to know for farmers in the northern part of the country is that once the beans hit about, let's say, June 25th to June 30th, I don't care when you planted them. If you planted them April 1st, May 1st, June 1st, they're going to start flowering, the reproductive stages kick in, and the beans are just a little more sensitive to many things. So for example, if a farmer wants to go out there and spray a herbicide, some of the herbicides to control weeds are not labeled once the beans begin to flower. So as a farmer, you can kind of plan out your entire growing season and say, hey, I've got these herbicides to spray early before flowering and these to spray later after flowering if I need them.
Well, to say soybeans are sensitive once they start that reproductive stage is probably a little bit of an understatement, because soybeans will abort a good share of their flowers. And the reason why, soybeans only have one purpose in life, it's to make seed. And so if they aren't sure that the weather's going to be good enough, that they're going to have enough fertility, that bugs aren't going to destroy them, whatever, well, if they think they're in jeopardy, they're going to abort a bunch of the flowers and just save a few flowers to make sure they at least get a little bit of seed made so they can go on for another year. So what farmers have to do is try to influence those soybean plants, take away all the stresses they possibly can, whether it's drainage, whether it's compaction, whether it's fertility, weed control, diseases, insects, so the soybeans think everything is perfect. I can keep all these flowers because we're going to be able to make lots of seed.
Well, once again, in the northern part of the United States where we have indeterminate soybeans, they will begin to flower shortly after the longest day of the year, which is June 21st. That's coming right up.
So if there are weeds to control like our weed of the week, you better get it done right now. We'll show you how to stop this tough weed later in the show.
What's next in weed control technology? Roundup Ready 2 Extend soybeans will provide tolerance to dicamba and glyphosate and will be built on the Genuity Roundup Ready to Yield trait. See them in action at extendfollowafield.com.
Experience matters in farming, and when it comes to efficient power, no one has more experience than Case IH. Our industry-leading SCR engine technology has powered over 35,000 pieces of equipment and has over 17 million operating hours in North America alone. It was the right solution from the start, and it's proving itself right again as our new generation of Tier 4B equipment takes to the field. Proven power, proven efficiency, proven in the field. Case IH. Be ready.
Looking to maximize yield? Quick Roots is a microbial seed inoculant that allows the plant root to explore a greater volume of soil, the key to higher yields. Quick Roots continues to generate yield response on corn, soybeans, wheat, and more. Quick Roots is applied to the seeds so the live microorganisms go right to work, enhancing seedling vigor, increasing the uptake of certain nutrients, including NPK, and expanding root volume. Maximize yield on your farm this season. Call TJ Technologies or your local dealer and get your Quick Roots today.
Get the most from the genetic potential in your crops, reduce plant stress, and increase yield. BioForge upregulates key genes to keep roots growing and reduce ethylene for improved plant stress tolerance. BioForge mixes well with other products for easy application with every pass through the field. BioForge, progressive growers' choice to improve root growth, reduce crop stress, and increase yield. Make every growing day count with BioForge from Stoller, USA.
Capello corn headers are designed for producers who expect more. Expect more grain in your bin. Expect an industry-leading 2-year manufacturer's warranty. Expect Capello-designed chopping and folding options that save you time and money. And whether red, green, or yellow, expect row size options that fit your operation because all producers deserve the best. Expect Capello. It's ahead above the rest.
A proven herbicide for decades, dicamba can provide burn-down residual control of tough and resistant weeds for up to 14 days. That's another reason why farmers will use dicamba for years to come. Brought to you by Roundup Ready Plus Weed Management Solutions.
Once we get into the growing season, we always advise farmers do some plant tissue analysis on your farm. Soil testing is something that's commonly done in the spring or the fall, but this plant tissue analysis can be done during the season. We advise people to do it once a week, at least in a few spots in a few fields. It doesn't take that much time, but if you have this information, it really helps you address your in-season fertility needs.
One of the big questions we've been getting this year is about nitrogen. For some areas, there were huge amounts of rain, there was delayed planting. Fall applied nitrogen, farmers are just figuring there's a bunch of that may be lost or pushed down a little deeper in the soil. My crop's not going to be able to get to it in time. For spring applications, could be the same worries. So for many farmers across the country, let's take some plant tissue analysis right now to see what I need for nitrogen, because in crops like corn and wheat, for example, that are heavy nitrogen users, you may need to get right back out there and put some more nitrogen on.
So whether we're talking corn, soybeans, or wheat, there are 3 different methods of application. And especially for corn and soybeans, where we have wider rows, a farmer can inject that nitrogen and actually put it into the soil. That's very difficult to do with wheat. With wheat and with corn and soybeans also, a farmer will either foliar feed or just dribble nitrogen on top of the ground. Like in wheat, for example, we run stream bars on our farm, so we've got these streams dropping down to the ground. In corn and soybeans, we've commonly drug hoses that can drag right along the surface of the soil, laying that nitrogen on top of the ground. Now, obviously, if you're going to do something like that and you're going to put a fair amount of nitrogen out there, you want to use a nitrogen stabilizer with it, number 1. And number 2, you're really hoping for rain pretty soon.
Well, we'll see a lot of farmers look at the forecast. They see, hey, we got an 80% chance of rain tonight starting after 10. Well, guess what? We're going to be putting on as much nitrogen as we can, get as many acres covered as we possibly can, because we're going to get some rain to wash that down into the soil. Now, that wouldn't be true of things like P and K. If you're putting out phosphorus, potassium, they don't move very much with water down into the soil. So, it's a different thing. If we can inject those, if at all possible, that's the best way to do it. Otherwise, you could do some foliar feeding like with potassium. With phosphorus, we just don't see that moving through the leaves and into the plant very well. That you really need to inject in the soil and get lots of moisture to get it into the crop.
The other disadvantage with the foliar applications is you just can't put many nutrients on total. For example, we might side dress in our corn. Well, we do side dress in our corn, and sometimes we'll put on 50 to even 100 pounds of nitrogen in one shot as a side dress. We might do the same thing in wheat. We might put on 50 pounds in soybeans, but all that is either injecting or dragging a hose or stream barring. When we talk about foliar feeding, we can only get a few pounds of nitrogen out there, and I know there are many people that talk about, oh, these foliar fertilizers have so many more pounds and it's so much more available. Well, it may be more available and it may have a few more pounds, but there's no way you're going to get 50 pounds in one application of a foliar feed. Plus the fact if you were to try to get 50 pounds out there, you'd really burn that crop. So all you can do with foliar feeding is run low rates. You usually have to dilute it down with water, and generally speaking, you're going to be out there on a real regular basis every week or two.
Well, the foliar feed is really just a boost. That's what we're trying to say here. You can't totally replace your pre-emerge program with one foliar application done mid-season. It just doesn't work that way. But let's say that you had your preseason program done quite well and your early season fertility was good. Everything is great. Now your crop is, instead of 200 bushel corn that you were kind of expecting and fertilizing for, you got a shot at 220. Well, here's where a foliar can come in and help you out. Or if you had some heavy rains and you say, you know, I'm just a little bit short, a foliar could be the boost that your crop needs.
When we talk about things other than NP and K, a lot of times we forget that, you know, sulfur is really important in the plant. Micronutrients are really important in the plant. And you know what? We don't need a lot of those. We actually could foliar feed with some of those nutrients, or we could mix those nutrients together, injecting or dragging a hose or even stream barring. We've done that in all three of these crops, corn, soybeans, and wheat. So I guess part of the reason why we're talking about this today, I know it's getting kind of late in the season for some farmers, but even so, we still want to look at plant tissue analysis. We want to see if our crop is short on some nutrients. And don't forget that it's not just nitrogen you can put out there. It's also P and K, but especially micronutrients and sulfur. We've seen a lot of micronutrient and sulfur deficiencies so far this year, in part due to heavy rains in some areas, in part due to really dry conditions in some areas. It does really vary. But the point is we've got to get enough nutrients out there, and those nutrients have to be available to the plant when it needs it if we're going to get top yields. Well, once again, we're talking about in-season fertility here. We really strongly encourage you, do some plant tissue analysis tests as you go throughout the season. That'll help you for this season and as you tweak your fertilizer program going forward. In addition to that, don't just look at nitrogen. Consider also putting some more P and K, sulfur, micronutrients, anything that your crop needs. Get some more out there. You're going to have to run with really low rates if you want a foliar feed, but you could put more on if you either inject or just lay that fertilizer right on the soil.
And while you're out scouting your fields this summer, keep an eye out for our Weed of the Week. It's actually one of the easier grasses to identify. We'll explain coming up later in the show.
If you could see how nitrogen loss causes yield loss, you'd fix it. So fix it right, with the stabilizer proven to reduce all three ways nitrogen escapes. Nutrisphere N Nitrogen Fertilizer Manager. It keeps nitrogen in a more readily available form longer. With today's market and environment, it's a high priority to keep your nitrogen on track. To higher yield with Nutrisphere N.
A farmer's attention to detail is what makes the difference. You take the time for service management because you know how vital it is to your operation. You service your field like everything else because soil sampling makes all the difference and gets the results you want. Download the app Soil Test Pro and start grid sampling today. Keep your farm growing strong. The more you test, the more you know.
Could I boost my potential by foliar feeding?
You can. Foliar feeding can correct nutrient deficiencies and sustain your crop through stress. It's a great way to deliver nutrients that your crop lacks to reach its full potential. Research proves it. Applied alone or in combination with your crop protection program, AgroLiquid products assure that when the season presents opportunity, you can boost your crop's yield potential by foliar feeding. For more info, visit agroliquid.com.
The Case IH Spring Sales Event is on now, making it a great time to get the equipment you need for this season. With 0% financing for 60 months on all Farmall and Maxim Series tractors, as well as our complete line of hay tools, you can turn everyday chores into everyday savings. But hurry, the Spring Sales Event ends June 30th, 2014. For more information, ask your local Case IH dealer or go to caseih.com/special offers.
If you watch Ag PhD TV, you'll love the new Ag PhD radio show each weekday on Rural Radio Sirius XM Channel 80. This is Darren Hefty. On the new Ag PhD radio program, we'll take live callers and provide the agronomic information and brotherly banter you've come to expect from Ag PhD. We'll feature a Back 40 segment where we talk to farmers and agronomists around the country to share what's going on with crop production. And it wouldn't be Ag PhD without addressing a pest of the day. Tune in to the Ag PhD radio show each weekday at 2 p.m. Central on Rural Radio Sirius XM Channel 80.
Darren and I have gotten a lot of questions about subsurface irrigation over the last few years, so we wanted to talk about that just a little bit today.
Well, I'd say more so than questions, Brian. Even for our own farm, we're looking at it. We're in an arid climate. We've come through a couple of really dry years on our farm, and you think, wow, it would be so much nicer. I mean, we had decent yields last year for the most part, even though we were really dry. But what if we could add some moisture? And you know, center pivot irrigations just don't fit on a lot of our ground.
Well, I don't know about that. I would say center pivot would fit on most of our ground, but the disadvantages to center pivot, number one, and you may not have even given this a lot of thought, other people, non-farmers, can see the center pivot irrigation. So let's say it is kind of a dry year, and they have restrictions in towns that, oh, I can't water, and then they drive out to the country and they see you watering. Guess who they're going to complain to? All the politicians, and pretty soon we've got another issue on the farm. If it's subsurface irrigation, then the non-farmers don't even see any of that. We keep that out of their heads.
Well, even just seeing that irrigation running in the field, people just naturally are questioning what's going on. Man, it seems like they're putting a lot of water out there. Why do they have to put so much water out there? Yet they probably drive by the golf course and don't really question why they're watering that every day.
Okay, so anyway, yes, center pivot could fit in a lot of fields, but it is nice when we can get into the corners with subsurface irrigation. The big disadvantage to subsurface irrigation is it's going to cost more money up front. However, we've got two different styles that we're looking at, even on our farm. We've got a little demonstration, so if you want to come to our summer field day, it's Thursday, July 24th. We invite you to come and take a look at this stuff that we've got going on here. Our two different styles are this. We've got subsurface drip tape set about every 60 inches roughly. We're in 30-inch rows, so basically every other row we've got subsurface drip tape. That's a pretty good way to go. You can usually get by with at least a third less water. I've talked to some farmers who've said half the water as center pivot irrigation because we don't have all that evaporation above ground. The other nice thing is you can run fertilizer through those lines too, just like you could through center pivot. Now the other style of subsurface irrigation we've got is watering through tile lines. So basically blocking our tile lines, filling them with water, and allowing that water to go out. It's going to require more water, probably almost as much as what center pivot irrigation would, because we're trying to raise the water table again doing that, and the tile lines are probably only going to be every 20 feet apart as opposed to our subsurface drip tape, which is every 5 feet apart. So we got some differences there, and just some things that you might take a look at and consider for your farm.
Now when we talk about irrigating through tile lines, and this is something that's a real common misconception in our industry, just with other farmers that we talk to, that any tile system we can do this with. No. If you've got tile that's out in your fields, chances are it probably won't work for just converting it into a subsurface irrigation type system. You've got to put those tile lines a lot closer together. They have to be a lot shallower in the soil profile.
Maybe 3 feet.
Yeah, they've got to be laid out specifically with subsurface irrigation in mind when they're put into the field. They will also be a very good drainage system. When you think about tile lines that are 15 or 20 feet apart, you're going to have great drainage in your field. So they don't have to be huge lines or anything like that. You do get a dual purpose. So Brian said, well, it's going to cost a lot more than putting in a center pivot right off the bat. Well, kind of, but when you compare it to putting a center pivot out and pattern tiling your field, all of a sudden now the cost says, well, hey, this isn't such a bad investment. Plus, I don't have that center pivot above ground, so I'm not worried every time there's a big windstorm coming through that it's going to blow over my center pivot or anything like that. Everything's underground and protected, and it's going to last for a long, long time.
Yeah, so we realize that center pivot is going to be cheap and simple and easy, and a lot of people are familiar with it. Well,
just cheaper
compared to these other methods. But when you take a look at the advantages to subsurface irrigation, you can understand why a lot of farmers are considering that for their operations.
There's certainly a lot of positives to be able to add water to your field when you need to help your growing crop. Another thing that can help your crop is controlling our weed 100%. We'll show you how to do that coming up next.
The Weed of the Week is sponsored by the Enlist Weed Control System from Dow AgroSciences, a new herbicide and trait system that will build on glyphosate.
You work to protect your farm's legacy and to keep it going. Introducing the Enlist Weed Control System, an advanced herbicide and trait system that will build on glyphosate for exceptional control of tough weeds. The next chapter begins.
Our weed of the week is barnyard grass.
Now, I made a comment earlier in the show that this is one of the easier grass weeds to identify, and I'll just say this. There are a lot of problem grasses, and it varies depending on where you're at in the country and what crops you're raising and so forth as to which ones you're going to face on your farm. But it's important that you understand how to identify grasses because control methods may be a little different from one grass to the next. Now, barnyard grass is so easy to identify because it's missing something that other grass weeds have. It's called a ligule.
Yep, so when you find no ligule on a grass, you pretty much have barnyard grass, especially in most of the Midwest.
Now, when we're talking about that ligule, what we're basically talking about is when you bend back the leaf blade right where it hooks up to the main stem. As you bend that back, normally you'll see some little hairs there or a membrane there. That's the ligule, but with barnyard grass, the ligule is absent.
The problem with barnyard grass recently has been there have been barnyard grass plants found to be resistant to Roundup. That's a real challenge because in most fields, that's all we're using for grass control post-emerge is Roundup. So if any barnyard grass escapes the pre-emerge herbicide, we've got a real problem on our hands, especially in corn.
Well, that just means we have to step up our pre's. And what's happened a lot across the country is as farmers have gone to using Roundup Ready corn or Liberty Link corn, where they know they've got this great post-emerge product that's also going to control grasses, well, they've said, you know, in order to pay for that, because the seed costs a little bit more, I'm going to cut back on my pre-emerge herbicide. I'm not going to invest $20 or $25 down. I'm only going to invest $10 down, so I'm going to use a half rate, then I'll try and clean things up with post. So if your Roundup isn't going to work post-emerge, you've got to use a great pre. Now, you may say, well, wait a second, there's other post options, aren't there? Sure, you could use Accent. That's going to cost you $20 or maybe even $25 by the time you add all the additives in with it. So to me, it looks like a much better investment to use that pre. Plus, even if you do have to use post-emerge control, you're going to be way better off if you can control 95% or more with your pre-emerge program.
So if you do have barnyard grass on your farm, what we want you to do is use a higher rate of Harness, Surpass, Outlook, or Dual. And you might say, well, hey, I'm using Triple Flex, or I'm using Verdict, or one of these combination products. Okay, that's fine, but you can still bump up that rate a little bit, number one, or just take your lower rate of Sure Start, Triple Flex, Verdict, any of those, and put in another grass killer. Like Verdict already has some Outlook in it. Take Verdict and blend it with some more Outlook. Take Sure Start, blend it with some more Surpass, for example.
Well, those are good strategies, Brian. And then again, get out there timely with your post-emerge product, because let's say that you let that barnyard grass get up to 2 to 4 inches tall, and you realize
why are you doing 2 to 4 inches tall? That's a foot tall.
You realize,
and that's the whole thing.
You realize
that's
Roundup doesn't work. Now there's no rescue.
Right.
Because if you're going to use something like Accent, you need that barnyard grass to be 1 inch tall, maybe 2 inches tall at the high side.
Well, even 2 to 4 inch tall barnyard grass Accent's not too bad.
But you're losing yield already.
Yeah,
and that's the big thing. You want to get out there early, make sure you're going to get it under control, and if you can't, now you still have time to come back with a rescue before you've lost 20 or 30 bushels of yield.
Okay, so in corn, yeah, this is a little challenging. In wheat and soybeans, not so much. In wheat, we would suggest using Prepare Down, then follow post-emerge. Axial is pretty decent, but there are a number of other grass killers that are okay on barnyard grass. In soybeans, it's real easy. Use Treflan, Sonalan, or Prowl Down. That'll probably wipe it all out to begin with. But if you do have any that come post-emerge, Select Max, Arrow, Fusilade, I mean, just about any grass killer is fairly decent on barnyard grass if you use the right rate.
So the first key is identify our weed of the week. It's barnyard grass. And when you look at grasses, look for that ligule right where you bend the leaf back where it hooks up to the stem. If you don't see any kind of ligule at all, chances are you're dealing with barnyard grass.
Well, that's it for our weed of the week, but stay tuned. Iron Talk is coming up next.
Iron Talk is brought to you by Case IH.
What are farmers doing to feed the planet? They're using Quadtrek technology, soil management, and planting systems from Case IH to foster a better growing environment that maximizes yield potential. Visit caseih.com to be ready.
When you're upgrading on equipment, some pieces of machinery make you money and are worth the investment. Other pieces of new equipment can save you significant time in the field or with repairs. We'll discuss something that could do both on today's Iron Talk. When it comes to a good pull-type mower conditioner, if you're cutting alfalfa hay or pasture grass or something else, this is a piece of machinery that's critically important in your operation. Almost anywhere I travel, I meet a farmer complaining about it raining only when he has hay lying on the ground. More commonly, though, I see the problem of farmers not getting the hay cut timely. The difference in relative feed value for livestock and simply the quality of the hay all starts with a timely cutting. If you're broken down, you just can't get the job done. With the new mower conditioners, many of the upgraded features focus on reducing downtime in the field. For example, look at the shock hub on Case IH's machine. It protects the cutter bar when you find an obstruction like a rock or an animal mound in the field. Rather than the gearbox getting obliterated, the shock hub takes the blow. It's a fairly easy 10-minute fix. Whether your machine is new or old, you still need to take the time to make some adjustments to the machine. Make sure your cutting tools are sharp for an even cut and less streaking. Set your angle and flotation right for good quality as well. Set the pressure and gap of the conditioning rolls to make creases in the stems for drying, but not tearing them up and tearing leaves off. When properly maintained and operated, your pull-type mower conditioner can provide your operation a great return on your investment. That's all for today's Iron Talk, and now, back to the show.
You can put more bushels in your bin without expanding the farm with Yield Track. The new 24-row planter from Titan Machinery features the Case IH Early Riser planting system. Yield Track will take you to the field first with extra flotation come spring. The tracks eliminate pinched rows and reduce compaction. All 22 and 30-inch Yield Tracks come loaded with Case IH technology, including cable drive and AccuRow. Grab more bushels from every acre with Yield Track from Titan Machinery.
Looking to maximize yield? Quick Roots is a microbial seed inoculant that allows the plant root to explore a greater volume of soil, the key to higher yields. Quick Roots continues to generate yield response on corn, soybeans, wheat, and more. Quick Roots is applied to the seeds so the live microorganisms go right to work, enhancing seedling vigor, increasing the uptake of certain nutrients, including NPK, and expanding root volume. Maximize yield on your farm this season. Call TJ Technologies or your local dealer and get your Quick Roots today.
I wish I could side dress more than just nitrogen.
You can. While side dressing is efficient for nitrogen applications, you can also use that opportunity to apply PK and the micronutrients your crop needs. AgroLiquid's Calibrate and MicroLink products allow you to nutritionally balance your side dress application efficiently and economically. Let agriculture liquid fertilizer help you make your next crop a bumper crop. For more info, visit agroliquid.com.
The Case IH Spring Sales Event is on now, making it a great time to get the equipment you need for this season. With 0% financing for 60 months on all Farmall and Maxim Series tractors, as well as our complete line of hay tools, you can turn everyday chores into everyday savings. But hurry, the Spring Sales Event ends June 30th, 2014. For more information, ask your local Case IH dealer or go to caseih.com/special offers.
Dirty work pays. That is if your dirty work includes a Soil Max Gold Digger tile plow. Soil Max tile plows feature zero deflection technology. With the only tile plow factory paired with Ag Leader's IntelliSlope control system, you eliminate the need for grade calculations and lasers. So make your next investment in a Soil Max Gold Digger. Better yield, longer planting and harvest windows, better water management is all yours with Soil Max. Visit soilmax.com.
Closed captioning for Ag PhD is sponsored by Norwood Sales.
The all-new S-Cube commercial tender is the only tender on the market with poly tanks, giving you the capability to haul seed, fertilizer, water, or liquid fertilizer. Each cube can hold 300 units of seed, 2,000 gallons of liquid, or 300 cubic feet of fertilizer. Options include full functioning wireless remote, stainless steel conveyors, and self-contained hydraulics. Get yours today at Norwood Sales.
That's all the time we have for today's show, but for more agronomic information, we invite you to tune in to SiriusXM Channel 80. That's the Rural Radio channel, each weekday at 2 p.m. Central, 3 p.m. Eastern for Ag PhD Radio. Darren and I go through a number of different questions, and we take your live phone calls.
And of course, we'd like you to tune in again next time to Ag PhD TV for another Weed of the Week, Farm Basics, Iron Talk, and a whole lot more. I'm Darren Hefty.
And I'm Brian Hefty. Thanks for watching Ag PhD.
Plants actually tell farmers what nutrients they need. They don't do it verbally, but farmers get the information through plant tissue analysis. It's another way farmers practice responsible nutrient management. To learn more, visit rnmf.org.